All right, we're back. A&J Sports. It's actual sports. No more fantasy football. This week we're
Taking a week
taking it.
off.
Yeah, so we're going to take a week off. We're going to come back to Fraudulent Joel and the rest of them later. This year we're focused on basketball. NBA preseason's in full swing. Regular season starts next week, I guess. So it's coming up in just
The first,
tomorrow. Oh, what am I? Regular season about to. I'm thinking about the Knicks' first game. I'm like, that's when the regular season starts for me. But NBA is about to start, and it's exciting, and we're going to talk about it. So I guess we'll get into just some off-season updates, some updates about our teams, and then kind of let you know what we think about how the league's looking this year.
yeah.
All right.
So
So
league-wise, big update was, obviously Dame to Milwaukee. That was biggest trade by
huge.
far. There's a lot of repercussions with like Drew Holiday being shipped to Portland and then Boston. A lot of other minor things along the way, but obviously the biggest piece of the move was Damian Lillard to Milwaukee, and it arguably pairs two of the league's best stars, two of the top 10 stars in the league together, but will it amount to a ring? What are your initial
Yeah.
thoughts on it, Anthony?
I mean, it was interesting because I think this offseason, obviously, Miami was the number one kind of team. Like everyone was expecting Dame to Miami. That was, I mean, for I feel like 2, 3 years, that's kind of been the expectation. There were a few other teams kind of thrown in there. It's like we heard a little bit about Toronto,
New
uh,
York, even.
New York. Like I feel like the Clippers were kind of thrown in there. Like it was a few different, even the 76ers you think about. But Milwaukee just wasn't a team that I was thinking about in the Dame sweepstakes. So for them to get him, like in the perspective of like Giannis, they have to keep him. Their goal, like Giannis said it publicly, he wants to see moves towards a championship. Dame was the biggest star player available in free agency or the trade market, and they got him. So that's like they are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of putting stars together. I do feel like they're lacking a little bit of depth. We'll get into some more in-depth things about kind of off-season or how their outlooks are going to look for the rest of the year. But while I'm concerned about their depth, like you said, it's two of the top stars in the league. Dame is probably like one of the best perimeter scorers, if not the best perimeter scorer in the league. And Giannis is one of the best interior post weapons in like this generation. So it's going to be awesome to see them play together, and I'm really curious how that shapes out going through the regular season. And obviously, they'll make it to the playoffs. How does that team look in the postseason after a full 82 games and play in tournament or play a NBA Cup thing? Now, how are they going to look after going through that and getting to the end of that?
It's it'll be an interesting season, but we'll see. We'll see with
Yeah.
them.
And I guess on the flip side, how do you feel about, well, we'll get into the Celtics a bit more later, but how do you feel about Drew Holiday's kind of getting flipped? Me personally, I mean, I feel like the Suns, or not the Suns, sorry. I feel like Portland made it out of this offseason and kind of this situation probably the best out of anyone. I mean, they end up getting DeAndre Ayton. They get picks out of it. They were able to flip Drew Holiday into more assets. I feel like they set themselves up in a position to like they're still going to be rocking with Scoot Henderson. They have Anthony Simons. They have Shaden Sharp. They now have DeAndre Ayton, and they have a lot of picks to go with it. Like I think Portland is a team that is being slept on, but I think the fact that they got the haul that they did from their moves this offseason is just as significant as Dame ending up going to Milwaukee.
It feels very similar to like the Jazz of last
Yeah,
offseason when they put in all those assets for Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell. But it's Portland's expectations are weird this year. I feel like it's similar to the Jazz's of last year again, but I think they have a solid core. They could
yeah.
win some games, could maybe sneak in the play in, maybe playoffs, but that'll be interesting. And then obviously the last part we were talking about the Celtics getting Drew Holiday, giving up Robert Williams and
Yeah,
Brogdon. I think losing Williams was the biggest
huge,
loss
huge.
in that, but I think the Brogdon's almost throw him away. You don't need it, but Holiday for Brogdon straight up good. The Williams part that
And I think was it just one? I feel like it was one, two picks
I think
they gave
there's a
up.
pick in there
Yeah, it's
too.
like a
So
pick
that's
or two. It's
not like depth wise, they lose some of that depth. Those are two of their best depth
yeah.
pieces last. and they gave it up for Drew Holiday, which I think is like upgrading to be a better team up top, which is what the league is trending towards. But will that win? That's the question. I don't know. There's a lot of effects from this
Yeah.
Bucks trade.
And then the other, I guess, really big story, another kind of guard drama between Daryl Morey and James Harden. They followed each other. They were in Houston together. They broke up there. They're back in Philly now. Harden was a little bit funky the past few years, and now it's finally gotten to a point where it seems untenable. He's really publicly said he does not. I think he called Daryl Morey like a liar in public in an interview. He's made it clear he doesn't really want to play. And I guess he said that he will play in Philadelphia, but he doesn't want to be there. There's talks of some other teams being interested in the trade there. There was talk that he was a free agent. He could have left this offseason or had the option to do that, chose to stay, and is now like, I don't know. It's an interesting, he opted in and I guess is staying now. It's an interesting situation, but I don't know. How do you feel about it? What do you think about the situation in general, and where do you see Harden ending up this year?
It's literally a repeat of history. I kind of just think the same thing's going to happen. I don't know if he'll go to the fat suit necessarily, but it doesn't seem like he's going to play in games as of now. So like, I think he's kind of set his mind on never playing again for Daryl Morey, which is I don't know why you have such a vendetta against one guy,
Yeah.
but I mean that's his thing. He's getting paid millions by that one guy, so again, I don't get it, but I mean, I ultimately think they'll find a way out for Harden. Like, I don't think they'll get exactly what they expected back, but Harden's still a decent player. I think
Yeah.
some teams will give up a decent amount of assets for him, like especially if you wait to the trade deadline when they could get something a lot more valuable for him. Maybe ship out another piece with him, like PJ Tucker, bring in a lot better of a star, something like that, if that's an option. But I think they'll ultimately get rid of him before the offseason. It's also similar that it's funny that they wound up in a similar situation to past again with Ben Simmons, similar to how he didn't
Yeah.
play and how he hold out. Literally 2 years later, almost 3 years later, and the guy they traded Ben Simmons for doing the exact same thing. It's the NBA. You gotta love
Yeah.
it.
It's interesting. I don't know what is going to end up happening with Harden. He is definitely like such a talented player, past his prime, definitely on the back end of his career, but still could be impactful to a contender, to a championship team. I think he needs to be someplace where he wants to play, though. That's the one thing. He's like Kyrie. He's like Kyrie, but like not as like less controversial Kyrie. Like Kyrie, but he gets fat instead
who's
of.
who is a more of a diva in your mind between those two, Kyrie and Harden?
I would
That might
say,
be the
I would say
best question.
Harden. I would say Harden, just because I think Kyrie, like his not playing, even though it's like, I think Kyrie not playing is like for. I don't agree with his rationale for not playing, but it's never just like, oh, I like don't like this person, so I'm not going to play. Like he has like during COVID, he was like, oh, I'm gonna be like iffy about like there are just reasons why. Even though I just like I don't agree with them,
There are
but he
reasons.
has reasons for it. Harden's reason, like you were saying, just seems like he just doesn't really get along with Daryl Morey. I'm sure there's more inside knowledge to that, more things with their relationship, conversations they've had, promises that have been made and not kept. But at face value, at least, Kyrie's just being Kyrie when he's not going games. Harden is like doing it to make a point to Daryl Morey in this case.
That's fair. The one thing I will point out is that Kyrie has requested almost probably double the amount of trades.
Yes.
I don't want to start getting into this, but I'm sure you could make a big argument for either or. But yeah, that's where we stand with James Harden right now in the
Yeah.
NBA. So ready to get into the our teams now?
Yeah, so we'll let you start with the Wizards. Y'all got a new face of the franchise now, some new young players in there. How are you feeling about this year? Give me the rundown.
So I was feeling decent about it. We had like an okay offseason. We obviously are going into a bit of a rebuild, but it was kind of surprising to me that we had the worst odds, like the lowest win
Mhm.
total of every team in the NBA. Because I feel like there are teams that are definitely worse than us. Like on paper, we have a very mediocre team. I think we have decent guards in Jordan Poole, Tyus Jones, like Corey Kispert. We have Koulibaly now. We have all these young pieces that kind of Kuzma that fit together that that kind of have potential. And I don't necessarily think it'll pan out to a playoff spot or play in even this year. But I don't think we're the worst team in the NBA. And I mean, we were able to recoup some assets for Beal, which I was happy about. I didn't think we got too much for Porzingis, but in the end, like I think the GM was set on kind of restarting the team, going for younger assets, and that's what we got. So I mean, I would say we are rebuilding, but it'll be interesting to see how we do because I think we have talent on the team and players that can put up numbers like Kuzma and
Yeah.
Poole. But again, I don't think we'll really amount to much this year. But I don't think we are the worst team in the league. We're in this weird spot where we're probably bottom 5, 10 in the league, but we're not. I don't think the worst team in the
Yeah.
league.
I think the re-signing of Kuzma was really the biggest thing. Like in my head, I thought that I thought you were going to sign and trade Kuzma or just let him go this offseason. Yeah, I was
I
like,
didn't know.
I felt like that was going to be the indication of just full blown rebuild. But it's like if you have Kuzma and Poole and Tyus Jones, and it's like it's not like you're just okay with losing. Like you're going to win some games. It's like you're not going to be terrible, but how good are you going to be really? That's like the question. And I don't, and like it would require Kuzma or Poole taking their game to the next level for y'all to be like a play-in team actually. But I definitely don't think you're the worst team in the league.
And I think the thing that's weird is we brought in a lot of depth. Like we brought in Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari, Tyus Jones, Landry Shamet. Like we brought in pieces. Like I don't think we're the worst team in the NBA. I think the Magic are there. There's other teams right around there, Pistons. But I mean, we'll see how it pans out. I don't love our coaching situation either, so maybe that'll get changed up throughout the season. But we'll see. It's kind of the outlook I've got right now. Not too much to look forward to, but I know you've got a bit to look forward to this year. So
Yeah, say I
with
do
that,
not. This is like the first year ever. I feel like I'm super excited to talk about the Knicks, and oh my gosh, last year was great. You know, finished as the 5 seed, beat Cleveland in the first round, ended up losing to Miami, which disappointing. I feel like we were better than Miami last year, but it is what it is. Jimmy Butler wasn't going to be stopped. He had another year like that in him, so it happens. But this year we're pretty much running it back with the exact same squad. The biggest addition, really the only addition, Dante DiVincenzo. He's going to factor into the rotation. We lost Obi Toppin, traded him to Indiana. They're not the same type of player, but Dante DiVincenzo is going to be the guy he's going to be the replacement player in our rotation. Another guy who I think probably the biggest storyline. I guess we have our top three guys, obviously RJ, Brunson, Randall. Brunson and Randall are like, I think Brunson established himself as a clear all-star point guard, one of the best in the league last year. I think he is our best player, clearly, and I think it's really on Randall more to get back to that all-star level he had a few years ago. If he can be there with Brunson doing what he's doing, RJ Barrett's been a little bit of a disappointment just in the sense that he hasn't broken through to like the all-star level yet. I mean, he's averaging like 18 in between 18 and 20 points a game. So it's fine, but in order for us to be that next level of team, it's like it would be great if he could be an all-star himself. Um, the other biggest storyline, I think, is Emmanuel Quickly. I feel like for people who are, it's like a kind of if you know with him. If you follow the Knicks or if you're just kind of aware of sixth man of the year, like if you just kind of aware, what Quickly was doing last season. He was great off of our bench and putting himself in a position where going into a year where he's eligible for his rookie extension, he could be making 25, 30 mil a year. He could be making similar money to RJ Barrett next season, which I feel like would be totally deserved. It's just a matter of, does he actually get that extension? How much are we able to pay him? Does he end up going in free agency? he is also someone who, if we were to trade for a star, granted, I don't know who it would be this season, but he's like a key piece. Like he would get moved in that deal 100%. So it's a weird position with Quickly, but I love him so much. I love our roster. Josh Hart, you can see him in one of the photos up here. He was a great trade addition, I think, for that first round pick we gave up for him. 100% worth it. He fits our team perfectly. I think he's going to be similar to DiVincenzo, just in good 3-and-D guy, hardworking. I think they just fit the culture of our team really well. And then the last one on the top right, Jericho Sims. I think he's like a center. He's another one who you don't know about the Knicks. You don't know about them. Just pay attention to Jericho Sims. He's one of the most athletic players I've ever seen. It's insane. He's like 6'10", 242 feet. Like he's a built 6'10", and he just flies. It's nuts. He was like really just a reserve center for us last year. He got some attention, but with Obi Toppin gone now, there are some minutes behind Randall in the rotation that are available. He played mostly center last year. He's been getting some preseason minutes at power forward. Jericho Sims is someone who definitely, I think, is more involved in our rotation. And he's another guy who I think is really going to be impactful. He's young. Like, over a long period of time, he's going to continue to get better. And we'll probably end up getting a good extension of his own a few years down the line. So, yeah, that's my kind of outlook on the Knicks right now. Do you have any thoughts on our team, on how things are?
I'll say, I love Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. They're super scrappy, super just hardworking players, and I mean they both fit your culture great. I think they'll be, I mean not really addition for Josh Hart since he was there at the end of the season, but I think they'll be key factors this year for you all. So I'm excited to watch them.
Yeah. Shout out to number 51, Ryan Arcidiacono. That's just our Villanova bunch. He just happened to be on that Nova team too. He won't see any minutes for the Knicks this year, but we love. Yeah, he gets in the photo. It's another Villanova guy. We're happy that Ryan's on the team. We're happy that Ryan's on the team.
Oh yeah. Now let's dive into how we think the Final Four in the West and East will play out. Yeah. Right. All right. I can begin with my Final Four predictions for the West. I mean, I think LeBron and the Lakers, I think they're pretty much the most in my opinion, the most likely team to make it back to at least the conference semifinals. I think they have the most stacked team depth-wise now with the offseason that they had, bringing in Taurean Prince, Christian Wood, Gabe Vincent, ton of pieces they brought in, and they kept a lot of pieces like Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, people they had at the end of last season. So I think they're definitely going to make it back to that Final Four spot. I think the Suns, I think if they can stay healthy with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, if those three can play a majority of the games this season, they're built for the playoffs. So I don't see any way how they don't make it to basically win one round of the playoffs. I mean, the West will be tough, but those guys have playoff experience, so I think they'll be fine. I see them making it back. I'm going to go Grizzlies, too, making it to the Final Four. I think they'll have a tough regular season with Ja Morant dealing with the suspension, but I think on paper they have one of the best teams in the West, and they only got better adding Marcus Smart. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. Arguably one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. If Ja Morant can keep it together off the floor, I think they're definitely contenders in the West this year. And then finally, this might be a bit of a debate, but Warriors making it in over the Denver Nuggets here. I think the Warriors upgraded their roster all around. I think a lot of these Western teams did. Nuggets kind of stayed the same, lost some pieces that they had last year. And it's hard to sit at the top. It's hard to sit at the top, especially in the West. So I think Warriors, they upgraded Poole to Chris Paul so that they have somebody when they're off the court. When Curry's off the floor, they'll be fine. And I think that's arguably one of the greatest offseason additions any team's made this season. So I'm excited to see how it plays out, but those are my Final Four in the West. Do you want to go through yours, or should I finish?
I'll let you get through yours in the East because I'll circle back to your West picks. I want to let you finish everything. I want to let you finish.
Yeah, I see some comments you might be.
Let's get through the East ones too because I have less to say about those.
Gotcha. East, I think we're more in agreement
Aligned on
here.
the East one.
But yeah, so Celtics, I think they're basically a lock to make it back. Bucks, I think Celtics, Bucks, two best teams in the East. I mean, the most stars on those teams, most firepower. I just don't. I think they're the two favorites to win it all right now. So, in my opinion, I think they easily make it past the first round. I mean, they'll be playing somebody like not that great in probably the Pacers, maybe Raptors, somebody like that in the playoffs. It's not really a challenge for a team like this. I mean, I know they lost to the Heat last year, the Bucks, but I don't see the Heat facing that kind of problem if they do end up in that sort of circumstance. So I think the Bucks and Celtics handle their business in the first round. I think the more questionable, not questionable, but more up in the air picks for the Knicks and the Sixers. I think the Sixers they're gonna take a step back this year with Harden being out. I mean, hopefully they can recoup some of that value in a trade, but I just don't see it being the same. I think Maxey is a star and he will take a step up, but I just still don't necessarily think that the Sixers are going to be the same that they were last year with Harden, with Embiid on an MVP playing level, all the pieces working together, Harden being there. I don't know, but I do think they are still one of the top four teams in the East, so they'll win their first round of the matchup with new coach Nick Nurse. I think that'll be a good fit. But finally, the Knicks, your team here. I think Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, great pickups. Like literally fit your bill perfectly, fit that 3 spot, 2-3 spot. I just don't honestly see any other team contending for that spot. I think you guys are better than the Cavs. You
Let's
proved it
go.
last year. The Hawks, I mean, unless they figure it out
No.
somehow, they have a good team on paper, but they can't seem to win. So I don't really see them figuring it out all of a sudden. Pacers still pretty young. I think you guys are better than them. I could see you guys like we talked about this earlier, but I could see you guys potentially being the sleeper team that sneaks into the Eastern Conference Finals. Depending on how the regular season shakes out, I wouldn't
You
be
know,
super.
I like how you tried to butter me up with all that Knicks talk. I like it. I like it. I
Yeah,
think I agree with everything you just said about the Knicks. We're great. And, we could be a sleeper team. We'll get into my Eastern Conference pick. For the most part, I agree with you. I think that I think you listed the Celtics, Milwaukee, and Philly are the most talented teams in the Eastern Conference. I agree with that. How it shakes out, we'll get into mine. I think it'll shake out a little bit differently, but I agree with most of what you said there. The West, no, I can't agree with most. Memphis, no. I understand, I guess, kind of the principle of like if Ja's back and healthy and fine, then on and off the court, then that'll be okay. But Memphis gives me, or let me not say Memphis, Donovan Mitchell, Ja Morant gives me Donovan Mitchell vibes. That's like the career trajectory that he gives me, or that I feel off him, just in terms of the sense that he's going to be on these good regular season teams. He's going to be the best player on, these teams, but they're not going to make it past the second round of the playoffs. Like that's never going to happen. And especially this year, the way the West is stacked up, it's too many really like talented, experienced teams. I think Dylan Brooks, losing him, granted, I don't think he's like that big of a, I don't think it means that much ultimately on the court, but I think that's a big culture thing for them. I think the way that team were, like, they were an arrogant, kind of annoying team, but Dylan Brooks personified that, and I think that contributed to their success. Marcus Smart is like the more mature Dylan Brooks. So it's like, is this Memphis team going to be able to mature into that and be like a more consistent, established team?
We'll see.
That I'm not confident in at all. Golden State, I'm fine with Golden State. I agree with everything you said there. The only thing is, Memphis is more of the issue for me than Golden State, but Denver has to be in there. I don't care if it's over Golden State or the Lakers, but I feel like Denver, you were giving some Denver disrespect in one of our group chats. a few weeks ago, and I don't understand it. I don't understand what you have against Jokic and them, but they are going to be a top 4 team in the West this year. They will be, and they're going to be probably a top 3 seed. I would put money on that, like lock it in, and they're going to win their first round series, and they're going to have more depth and be healthier, and they're going to be way better set up than the rest of these teams when they get there. That's what has consistently happened. Just last year was the first time they won a chip off of it. And there's no reason to say that they won't put themselves in that position again. That's my only thing. I feel like Denver's got to be there.
Let me bring up one point, then I'll let you get to your Clippers point. I actually do kind of agree with the Clippers thing, but it's tight with how close the West is. Yeah. But do you think the Nuggets got better this offseason?
Not like strictly better. No, like not on paper. Like on paper, they lost more than they gained.
Okay. That's my question. And then like, other teams in the West, like these 3 you have and the 3 I had, did they get better?
But what Denver lost is not the same. Like they lost Bruce Brown, who else did they lose?
For them, Bruce Brown. They lost DeAndre Jordan, or not DeAndre. They lost. I think
Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown, 6th man of the year. What was he doing before Denver? He was considered like a role. He was considered a role player, like a maybe role, like a. He wasn't 6th man of the year before he got to Denver. I think there's a.
They have made players look a lot. Sorry about those technical difficulties, but
that's how we.
Finishing my point, I mean, Denver has made players, Jeremy Grant, Bruce Brown, as you just mentioned. I mean, there's been a lot of players that have came through there, came out better players. So I think you make a good point there. But yeah, I think it'll be tough. A lot of the other teams got better. They kind of stayed the same. We'll see how that goes. But you want to get to your final team out there?
Yeah. So we'll get into my predictions now. So I think we agreed with the Suns. I have the Suns in there. I have Golden State in there. Denver's got to be there over the Lakers. And then the Clippers. I feel like they're my final team there. I think you can't, like, they're in an interesting spot. I think they're in a very similar spot to the Lakers, honestly, because LeBron and AD, and honestly Milwaukee to an extent. Like, the players who we are most relying on and most expecting to take them to the next level just haven't been healthy consistently enough to take them there. I think that this is a year, though, that, Kawhi didn't really play last year. Paul George started playing more towards the end of the year, started to pick things up as well. I think this is a year, and the Harden stuff we're hearing about as well, maybe that could happen. I think this is a year the Clippers start to bring things together and actually see that translate into some more postseason success. So hopefully they can figure that out for themselves. They're about to move into their own arena finally, so maybe they're going to get something positive out of that. And then Eastern Conference predictions, we were on the same wavelength with Boston and, with Boston, Philadelphia, and the Knicks. My last one, though, and, so look, this is a hot take, I guess, but I'm dropping Milwaukee out of my Final Four. And I'm putting in the Nets. I'm going with New York basketball. I think Milwaukee's going to be, like, as I mentioned before, I think that they are probably one of the most talented, like top 3 talent in terms of their top-end stars. But their depth behind that is so poor. And they're relying on Dame, who has not really played a lot the last 2 years. Chris Middleton, former All-Star, but didn't really play last year. Giannis is Giannis. We know what we're getting out of Giannis, MVP caliber player. But behind that, though, if there's just one injury, one bad streak of games, it's going to set this team back. And there was already a little bit of, I don't know how, legitimate the drama is, but with Terry Stotts leaving so soon after he started, there was supposedly an altercation between him and the new head coach. So it's just an interesting situation in Milwaukee. I'm sure they're going to be fine. They're going to do well in the regular season. But in the playoffs, I don't know if I could see them having a difficult series against a Nets or an Indiana or, kind of one of those dark horse teams that's in the bottom halves of the Eastern Conference. And I could see that being an upset this year. So throw that in there as a hot take. I know it's a little bit out there as a pick, but I'm going to go with the Nets here.
Gotcha. I mean, I obviously have a bit to say there about the Bucks. I mean, the thing is, I can't say too much though because they lost to the Heat in the first round last year. So like, you're right. They are an injury away from potentially losing in the first round. And I think the Nets actually do have a team that is pretty built already, surprisingly, considering it was built via trades. But I do think the Nets are the team that could sneak in if it is not one of those teams. I do think the Nets could sneak in there. So I don't totally disagree there. But again, a bit of a disagreement with the Bucks and Nuggets across the board. But other than that, relatively similar picks. But yeah, let's go to our finals picks now, right?
Yeah. So you got Lakers and Milwaukee. Break it down for us. Who do you got? Who do you got winning that one?
Bucks. I mean, I think this is like the NBA script of this one. So I think this is going to be a good fight, but I ultimately think the Lakers are coming out on top. I mean, it's LeBron. The NBA knows that. LeBron knows that. LeBron wins. I know it hasn't happened the last few years, but he's a winner. He's going to find a way to pull this team together and make a run. He did it. He almost did it last year. I mean, the team was out of gas by the time they reached the Nuggets. They got swept. They put up a decent fight, in my opinion. They did get swept. But I think this team retooled, picked up the pieces they needed this offseason. I mentioned them earlier with Cam Reddish, with Gabe Vincent, with keeping D'Angelo Russell, keeping Rui, keeping Austin Reeves. I think this team is solid, and I don't see any reason they at least don't make it back to the Western Conference Finals, potentially winning it all. In this case here, I think the Bucks, as I mentioned earlier, I think they have a similar team to last year. They played a hot Miami team at the wrong time. Giannis's injury didn't play into things well. I think they're upgrading Drew Holiday. They're upgrading from Drew Holiday to Damian Lillard. I don't see too much of a change. They lost some depth, as you mentioned, but I just don't see. I see the star caliber play only getting better. So I think that kind of elevates them to the next level. I don't think the East got that much better, unless you think Boston got that much better. They picked up star pieces similar to Milwaukee, but I don't know if that really pushes them over the needle. So that's why I kind of think the East is more open. I think the Bucks can't escape with it just by elevating one position. But I don't know. I think the Lakers are a good pick to win it all this year. So that's why I'm going with Lakers Bucks finals. What do you got?
Yeah, so I kind of, although I'll say different picks for both of them for you, but I'm going with 76ers and the Suns. I think the 76ers, I do agree with what you said about the East. It's open this year, and I think Embiid is in his prime right now. I think this is Embiid's, like the window that the 76ers have, I think has been like the last like 2 years, and I think it's going to maybe extend like 2-3 years it's been going, and I think it has like another year or two left. I think Tyrese Maxey has been just ascending as a talent, as a starting guard in the league. And I honestly think if Harden leaves, it's probably going to be better for them. I think it's going to unlock Maxey, and it's going to give them a lot of depth that a lot of these other teams in the East are lacking. So I see them, regardless of whether Harden stays or goes, being able to keep Embiid at an MVP level and then see Maxey end up increasing his play to the point where it pushes them into the finals. On the Phoenix end of things, I think it's pure talent. KD, Beal, Booker, I don't think you're really going to get a better trio than that. And they do have legitimate depth on that team. They got Bol sitting on their bench. They got Grayson Allen. Now they have like just solid pieces that have proven themselves on other teams and that are going to be meaningful to them. So I see Phoenix being able to make it through to the finals. It is very health dependent for them. I think they're similar to Milwaukee or the Lakers, and that Beal is really probably Beal and KD are who you're relying on the most to push you over the hump, and they've had a lot of health issues. If they can stay healthy, I think Phoenix takes it away, and I see them beating Philadelphia in the finals. So that's where I'm going with that one.
I like that. So we both picked teams that are playing tomorrow night and kicking off the season. Lakers playing the Nuggets, Suns playing the Warriors. Interesting to see. But I think it's time we get into some superlatives. Go through the players who we think and teams that we think will have either good or bad years.
Yeah, so MVP first pick, I got SGA and OKC for mine. I think he's been consistently performing pretty well for them. He's been dominant. I think the only reason he hasn't been talked about it more seriously is because he hasn't been on a winning team. I think OKC is going to start picking up more wins, and that's going to be more MVP attention for SGA, which I see translating into that trophy this year if he can keep up his stats the way he has been.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar rationale for Doncic. I mean, he's been at the top every single year as an MVP favorite. I mean, he finally has his team figured out with Kyrie. I think having Kyrie only takes away some of the pressure. I think he figures it out. If the team's a top 4 team in the West, I finish it in the Western Conference standings. I think he could win this MVP, and I mean, it's finally his time, finally his year, hopefully. So we'll see.
Yeah,
And
and
then
then rookie of the year, I got, you know, today the news dropped that, wrongful death lawsuit was filed against them. So Brandon Miller cannot be a criminal like the rest of these Hornets players and stay on the court. I do think he will have a pretty solid chance at rookie of the year. Just based off of volume, he's a great shooter and scorer. I did not mean to say that he was a great shooter. That's not good. But but if he stays on the court, he's a good bucket getter. He's a good scorer. So I think based off volume in that offense, it's a lot of guys who are with iffy status in that team. He might just end up getting a lot of minutes and reps and being able to make advantage of that. Kind of similar to Paolo Banchero, I feel like a few years ago, just putting up good numbers based off of his kind of free reign in the offense.
Definitely. And I mean, I think it's clear that we're not picking the obvious choice for rookie of the year here, Victor Wembanyama. But as the closest guy competing for this award, I chose Chet Holmgren. I mean, he essentially could have been rookie of the year last year if he did play. But I think he has a similar skill set that Wembanyama has, and he's going to be on a better team. So I think there's a very good chance that if the team finishes, again, like has a good season, has a winning record, Chet plays a decent role alongside Giddey and SGA, I think he could definitely win this award.
Yeah.
I mean, all he needs is a Wembanyama injury, and but yeah, I can see that honestly being a coin flip between them.
Yeah. And then sleeper team, I'm going with Indiana for mine. Their over-under is 38.5 wins right now. I see Indiana being I see them kind of replacing Cleveland in the East, honestly. I think they're going to be that next team, I think, alongside the Knicks. Or just out of that group of, you think, under that top 3, it's like the Knicks, Cleveland, I don't know who else you even want to throw it. Who else is really meaningful in that group? Miami, I guess. Yeah, the Hawks are in there. But I think Indiana's the team out of that's the youngest and is going to be improving the most just off of their internal development. So I see them being a team that's above 500 this year. And I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I could see them being that next team out of we gave our top 4s. I could see them being that 5th best team, or maybe even being the 4 seed behind that top 3. I really do think they're going to grow a lot this year.
Definitely, yeah, I like that pick. I'm going with the Spurs here. I mean, very obvious reasons, but they finished with 22 wins last season, and obviously they have one of the best coaches of all time, Greg Popovich. I think they can put it together. I mean, you'd think Wembanyama can account for about 7 more wins compared to last year. So I just don't see how they don't get these 7 more wins. And I mean, their team got better all around, not just counting Wembanyama. They picked up other pieces. They added just recently. They added a Reggie Bullock, I believe. So I think they're destined to at least have a better season than last year. Which, I mean, you'd think 7 wins shouldn't be that hard to get. So I'm gonna go over there.
And then final one, down bad team. My pick for this one, Toronto. I just don't see them. Their under is 36.5 wins. I don't think they're going to do that well. And I honestly see them being a team that ends up, midway through the year, maybe closer to the trade deadline, just reloading and starting over from scratch. They have Siakam, they have Anunoby. Scotty Barnes I think he's someone they probably want to try to hold on to, but still, they have talented guys on that team, but not a talented team. And I think the only way to really rectify that is you gotta just blow it up, start over. So I'm going to predict that early on in the season they're struggling a little bit, and they end up just deciding to trade some guys and just falling fully into that tank and going under.
Very similar rationale for the Timberwolves. I mean, I think they have 2 stars and then Gobert there, who's just a fat contract. So, I mean, you have Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns. Besides that, I think they lost everybody else of value. So, I mean, if Anthony Edwards and Cat can't carry them to like 40 wins, unless they do that, that's the only way this is going to happen. And realistically, I think they're going to end up having to blow up this team, whether it's this year, whether it's next year. It's going to happen. They're paying way too much money to 2 centers. It's not going to work. They're going to need to pay other players if they want to have a chance to win. So I think I mean, the West is so competitive this year, and they didn't really get better, and a lot of other teams did. I say the Timberwolves are going to go under 45.5 wins.
Yeah, man. Bold predictions, final takes for this episode. Maybe I have a little bit of angst just because, he didn't come to the Knicks, but we beat them now. So I feel like I'm over it internally. And I still feel like Donovan Mitchell is going to end up requesting a trade away from the Cavaliers before the end of this. Before next offseason, Donovan Mitchell will have requested a trade and potentially be in another uniform. I think kind of adding on to what I was saying before about Indiana, some of those other teams being in that space. I don't think Cleveland is improving. I think you kind of mentioned it earlier as well, but we already beat them last year. And obviously, one playoff series, that doesn't mean everything, but what has changed that is going to make that series different? What is going to make Cleveland do better, throughout the regular season and get to that point and be able to beat us? They had home court advantage and they still couldn't. I feel very clear about them just being kind of a little bit, maybe not all the way below, but they're a tier below us. And I could see them just having kind of a slow start this year, dealing with some of those teams who have made significant efforts to improve. And if they start off the season, if we're getting a little bit further in and they're struggling to be in a play-in seed, or they're at the back half, if they're in 7 to 10 in the rankings, Donovan Mitchell heading into the final year of his current contract, or this is 2 years left, so next year will be the final year of his contract. Cleveland is going to not want to extend or not want to lose him for nothing if he's not interested in staying. So it's going to either be extension or trade, I feel like, next offseason. And Donovan Mitchell might push the envelope on that if they're just not performing the way that they should be.
I think this is a make or break year for them. So, I mean, if they don't start off hot early, it's going to be rough. So, definitely. And I kind of think relatively similar situation for the Kings. I mean, they had a great year last year. They finished 3rd in the West. But again, they didn't really do too much this offseason, similar to the Cavs. They didn't do too much to really retool, get better. And I think a lot of the other teams in the West did. And I think the Kings get off to a slow start. They had the clutch player of the year last year in De'Aaron Fox. And I don't know if he continues being as clutch. That's kind of a thing that is rare to continue year over year. But, I mean, it's definitely possible. But I just don't see them winning as many of these close games. I don't see them basically keeping up what they did last year. So I kind of think they fall out of the playoffs. Bottom 3 finish is a bit of a bold prediction, but I think it's possible. They're 1 injury away from Sabonis, Fox injury, and the team's going down a bad hill. So I think that's something to watch out for. The Kings struggling this season.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our, takes for the NBA heading into the regular season. We'll see y'all soon, I guess. Maybe not talking about the NBA. Next week, we'll probably be back with fantasy football. But for now, hold these NBA takes. We're going to let them marinate. We're going to let them turn true. And then we'll come back to y'all at some point and go back over these. So, yeah.
Thanks for listening.